Hi, and welcome to another episode of Dude, I'm gonna be a dad. No, no, I'm sorry. That's once again the wrong show. Welcome to an episode of Master Data, and today I'm going to talk to you guys at an executive level of what is master data and how we govern around it, how we transform it when we're moving it from a legacy system into a new ERP, um, and how we should purge data that is no longer relevant to the system. Master data management is a very big topic. It is something I feel very passionately about. And it's something that the executive staff needs to understand that it needs to be done. And you have to have staff to do this. This is not something that we do just willy nilly. It needs to be taken very seriously. Um, and I go over some of the reasons why it needs to be taken seriously from a security point of view as well. I hope you enjoy this video and let me know if you have any questions or concerns in the comments. Appreciate you. Hi, welcome to an information session on master data and master data management. In this section, I want to talk to you about what is master data and how it's used when you're working in your ERP system. Simply put, master data refers to the core data that's essential to operate your business. So this is your customers, your vendors, your products, your suppliers, your employees, your locations, their locations, sometimes the vendors' locations. Sometimes it's where things are manufactured if you're a manufacturing entity in the supply chain. Um, Everything about the core data of the data operations of your company, if that makes sense to you. So let's look at it. So master data is the essential bits of operational data. It includes fundamentals around business transactions. So customers and the information about the customers. Where are they? Where are they physically located? Their address. What products or services do they purchase from you? A little bit more like the CRM in most cases. Some don't do it as well. Products, products that you might sell, or services that you might sell. Suppliers, people that these are your vendors. These are people like your landlord if you are renting office space. Your employees, from a standpoint of the standpoint of they're going to be users using the system. They're going to have logins. You may or may not set them up as actual accounts payable because you might be doing reimbursements out of other systems and or payroll is probably done out of other systems. Locations. These are your physical locations, your branches. These are your customers' branches. Um, Warehouses. I mean, these are anywhere that you or your customers have a presence that somebody might go visit. And that really is what we're talking about when we're talking about master data. Master data management is managing the core entities of your business relations with vendors and your customers and the products that they have or they buy from you. And it needs to be managed. This is not something you just say, okay, I'm turning on an ERP, and don't worry about it. We'll just continue to operate it the same way we always have. Just throw data in there and don't care about anything. Well, I'm going to show you in this series why we don't do it that way. And I'm hoping the executives that I've had many a fights over um, how important this is understand that it makes your when your master data is well managed, your entire company operates more efficiently, more fluidly, more securely, and there's less risk. So let's kind of talk about where master data comes from. So let's talk about how do we get this master data into a new ERP system if you have a legacy system, or even some of the you know more modern systems, and you're just switching ERPs. Well, most legacy systems are only going to allow you to export into CSV. So you're going to have some issues when you're transitioning into to a newer modern ERP, because newer modern ERPs think of customers or companies as accounts, and they're anticipating that you're going to have one company, one account, and multiple addresses attached to it. And most legacy systems have always had a concept of, you know, I've got a company name, I've got an address, that's the record I'm looking at. You'll find that in most of your mainframes and dummy terminal type AS400 systems. And even some of the newer systems don't allow us to export in a way that um, we can take the data and move it easily into a newer system. So we're a lot of times left with old school CSV, let's move it to Excel. So we send it from our legacy system into an Excel spreadsheet, and then we have a choice. What do we do with it when we get it into our ERP? Do we take that horrible Excel spreadsheet that has no concept of the way that the ERP is going to be set up, and we import it? Well, you could. Um, Usually, most of the ERPs have some master data cleanup tools that allow you to merge and consolidate. But we're talking months. It could be months worth of cleanup effort to do a project like that. It's not going to be easy, and it's just not a fun thing to do within the ERP program built in, unless the ERP has a lot of foresight to think about that, and has these really specific tools to go in and look, hey, we're just going to automate this and merge all of these light things. The other thing that the ERP may or may not do is look for things like misspellings. Um, it will probably allow you to import them. It'll probably create the record, and then it'll probably say, well, the record's in there, but it's got an incorrect address at some point in time. But I don't like the fact that we're going to import incorrect addresses. And really, who knows how long you've had this legacy system, and who knows how much old data is in there. Companies move. They move physical locations. They move offices all the time. Companies go out of business. Putting dead data into a brand new ERP is not always a great idea. There's one other school of thought um, that some people go down. They say, all right, we're going to go into this new ERP and we're going to start with that database blank. Okay, and then we will have our customer service people input the data as they need it. I don't like this option, and here's why. if you're ever getting into an argument with an executive. Here's why. Most data input into an ERP is it needs to be reviewed. It needs to be assessed. And you've got all of these new users that are going to just go in there and put data in there. And a lot of times you'll find that people fell asleep during your training, despite how dynamic you wanted to be, because you didn't hire a comedian to do it. And then we'll just go ahead and create a new company called Mattress Place, and it'll have just this address because that's what they're used to doing. Now we've got multiple organizations potentially set up that might not have AP or AR. The EIN might be wrong. Your ERP might allow you to put the same EIN number in multiple places. It's going to cause a world of hurt and a world of cleanup unless somebody's sitting there monitoring what's going on. And it's also going to make it harder on the coordinators because now we're going to have to go in and put lots of data in. So it's just not my idea of a fun way of doing it. The way I've come up with is doing a legacy system, exporting it to CSV, and then they have this piece of middleware made by Informatica, and there's a couple others that are making something similar. And what it's doing is it's going to go ahead and sort through everything that we input through it, validate addresses, look for things like incorrect spelling, and potentially match like companies and make them a single record within their database, which then you can import that into an ERP system. So in a situation like this, we've got two mattress places with two separate addresses. Informatica will go through, validate them, say, hey, does Mattress Place really exist? Maybe looking at a lot of different data sources, company records for articles of incorporation. Who knows where it's checking? It's checking a lot of different valid places. And then it's going to sort and put all of those companies together that are like-minded or like-named in their database, and then you can import it here. And so if I was inside my ERP, right, and I was looking for Mattress Place, I would look and have this company pull up, and look, we'll have the two address records underneath it. And notice, it's correctly spelled the name of the road. So I much prefer this approach when it comes to importing the data out of your legacy system or out of your other ERP that you've decided to switch to. And the other benefits from Informatica is you can build a interface to it, allowing users to potentially validate any new company that they're trying to put in which case that can be put into the ERP directly and validated prior to your data czar having to validate. So I think this is a really good way to go long term with an ERP. We want the data checked, and having a middle piece of middleware like this, which has a copy of your orgs, is going to be a good place to start if you're building a multiple connections and bolting any additional things on like an API. It potentially could even feed information from the web, validate it in, and create a new piece of master data within the system automatically. And that should save you a lot of headache from a security standpoint, and a validation standpoint and make your data czars a lot happier. Hi, and welcome. This chapter is called Master Data, the Purge. Um, the Purge concept is, I think it's best to go ahead and delete old items out of the database, items that haven't been used in a year and a half or so. And what I want to talk to you about is the concept of what it is I would recommend purging. Um, most databases or most ERPs have kind of a concept, especially if it's doing single company with multiple addresses. If it's doing that setup, you are going to have over time dead addresses. And those dead addresses can confuse and cause issues for your customer service people, your salespeople, anybody that has to deal with this client of yours or this vendor, truthfully. And so I want to talk to you about purging old data from the system and how we do it at a very high level. So many ERPs have a function called hide this or set this as inactive. And that works, but I don't like it as much because usually people can make mistakes. They can unveil these hidden fields, especially in the ERP that I work with a lot. You can simply just turn it on and say, hey, show my hidden fields. Well, if you do that working in logistics, guess what? You could potentially misship a container to the wrong address. That could be really, really bad, especially if the address is in a wrong country. But I digress. So the concept of purging this data is only works if your database is not so relationship driven that the customer's address is directly attached as a record and linkage is built between the file that you create and the address that was used. So some ERPs will have a relational database where there's some linkage between this particular file, this particular org, and this particular address. If that's the case, just skip this video because you can't really do much about it. If it's not, then we need to look at how are records stored in your ERP as far as the file that's being worked on or the application function, and whether or not you can go ahead and purge old inactive addresses out of your system. Now, many times what you're going to find is the coordinators don't set addresses as inactive. This is why we're doing this. Sometimes salespeople don't tell you, hey, this customer's dead. And sometimes your accounting team doesn't say this vendor is no longer being used. Okay? So we need to look at this as a cleanup of active companies that your people are using every day that are seeing this in the list. And it's nice when it's clean, and it's less likely that they're going to click the wrong thing and send something to the wrong location. So remember, all ERPs do one thing really well, and that's grow. In other words, you're always going to be adding more data to this. And I want to emphasize getting old data out is also important. Data quality is important, but data accuracy in terms of this not being valid is also just as important. And this is really a job for your data czar or your admins to go through regularly and do. So how do we start? Well, let's do a list. What addresses haven't been used in a year and a half? Do a query against your database engine if your ERP doesn't have a function like this. And many of them don't. Take that query, export it to Excel. You'll always have this record of what you're moving. Now, what you do want to filter out is companies that only have one address, and if they're accounts payable or accounts receivable. Those organizations should only be deleted every 7 years, so you might want to go in and add information, add a note that this org can be purged from the system in X amount of years. Okay? Now, after we've gone through this list, we're looking for dead addresses that belong to companies or organizations that have multiple addresses associated with them. And those dead addresses are the ones you're going to purge. So you now have your list, maybe clean up with ones you're you're definitely going to target and delete. Re-export that to CSV, archive it somewhere, and make it a SharePoint site. What I find is salespeople like to data mine that type of data. I don't know why, but sometimes they'll learn more information about their customer that they might not know. Hey, this branch was closed, and sometimes it's just a conversation that started for them. Or I wonder what went into this company, went into this warehouse space or this office space. So sometimes I'll try and figure that out, and they'll say, hey, we were doing this for the people that used to work here. Maybe we can do it for you. I don't know. Salespeople are crazy. So you've got your list. You're not purging APs and ARs, and I would say go ahead and delete them. You have an archive, and what you're going to find is the coordinators are going to be happier because now they're looking at a much more managed, concise list of active potential places to send or do something with, or for salespeople to call on. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and you learned something about my recommendations on purging old data out of ERPs. And keep in mind, you might want to do this maybe in a year when you're moving from a legacy system into an ERP. You're going to find a lot of dead addresses that might not have been picked up by any of the software filtering. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions. Appreciate you. Welcome to the next segment called Data Governance, and it's one of my favorites because I get to stand up here on my soapbox. Let me get that on there. Oh. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about data governance and how we secure and govern the data that's entered into your ERP, whether that's a new customer, a new delivery location, a new prospect. Generally speaking, I think it's good to have eyes on it. And these are the reasons why. I've seen people try to set up fake addresses to have checks sent to them. I've seen them try and edit addresses to do the same. I've seen people misship things. I've seen invoices go to wrong addresses and or wrong companies. I've seen just error after error after error when it comes to training a lot of employees to use an ERP system and put the data in there properly. Additionally, there can be some data governance rules around AR, accounts receivable, when it comes to setting up new customers. I worked for a company for a while that required us to run Dun & Bradstreet on every single customer so they could do a credit score, and then they would go back in and do more credit scoring every few years. So it's important to consider how we set up data governance around any new companies or people that go into your system. Any new data sets should be verified, in my opinion, unless it slows down your workforce to the point where it's just not feasible, which I have seen happen as well. Bigger companies sometimes don't have enough people verifying the data, or they have the people that are verifying data doing other jobs, which can work as well. So the concept I would introduce to you is the concept that I love, Um, it's called a data czar, and a data czar goes in and evaluates any new companies um, that are created by end users, or you can set up a data czar to add certain data fields. Um, so so the goal is to have your customer service type in the information, the org's created, and then it's approved by the data czar. So in the ERP that I'm thinking of, I can tag orgs as temp. So I can have them, they can create them, but then they're tagged as temp. And in the notes section, we've had them go in and say they need these tags. So then we would, without Informatica, we've had to go in and do all of these verification steps to make sure that this is legitimately a um, a new org that we are doing business with. So why does this matter? Well, it matters for several reasons. Um, Let me give you a bunch of different scenarios here because they all are very relevant. Scenario one. So if we've got a new customer coming on, they have an AR account. Um, you need to establish credit limits if they're asking for credit from us to deal with their goods or whatever they're ordering or whatever they're processing, right? Number two, and I don't think you want just anybody setting credit limits, especially not a salesperson. I have seen salespeople. Uh, I've gotten the phone calls in the middle of the night that said, "Hey, they're out of credit. We've got all of this stuff coming in, and we need we can't pay their fees because we're out of credit for the client." And these calls are not my calls. These calls happen all the time where we establish credit limits and people go over their credit limits, and they love to try and run around. Um, the executive team who are probably the only people that can improve credit limits. So they love to call the IT department and say, "Hey, can you increase the credit limit?" And I've set up rules around this, where it's approved by certain people within the company, just so that not everybody's called every time this happens. But that does happen. So we also want to look at the fact that employees in America seriously can be very dishonest. In fact, 30% of all bankruptcies done by businesses are directly related to employee theft. This is not a statistic I make up. It's estimated that theft costs $50 billion each year to American companies. So it's one of the top reasons you really need to secure your master data, and you need to verify who's putting data into the system. This stuff happens all the time where people just think they can get away with stuff. They probably can in some cases, and you might want to keep an eye on it. I mean, I would have an off the record conversation of some of the situations I saw, and I don't know if I could prevent them truthfully. But I think if you force this mindset on them that their data is being verified and watched, it's going to act as more of a deterrent. Another thing that we need to be, uh, another concept I want to throw out there is, if we're working in a world where we have one customer and they have multiple addresses, what happens if the customer um, is using Amazon? Oh wait, let's do this. No. What happens if the customer is using a 3PL uh, to fulfill orders, or they have a lot of their products shipped to a 3PL? How do we handle that if we're shipping product to that 3PL? The concept of having one company, one address in the system, works really well on paper, but it's these types of scenarios that it doesn't work well for. Because Amazon's obviously one of the largest, well, is the largest 3PL in the entire world. They're doing distribution for everybody. That being said, you need to put information in uh, things like a shipping label that bring uh, your attention to Amazon as to the product that you're sending them. So let's say I was working for a company that manufactured springs, and um, our client was Bob Swing Sets, and Bob Swing Set had a defective swing, and Amazon was doing some of the assembly and found it. So now we need to send a product to Bob's uh, 3PL, Amazon, and we need that spring to be uh, put in the right section within the 3PL, because there was a defect, and the 3PL will go back in and reassemble it with that new part. But getting it to the right employee and having it associated with the right account is key, and that's usually done via the shipping label. So, in cases like this, what I recommend is we have uh, Amazon as the warehouse facility with this address, and then you will use the attention field to put in any specifics. So in these very few cases, you would have duplicate organizations, because most likely, if you're selling springs to somebody uh, that makes swing sets, somebody else that's using Amazon for distribution is also going to have the same problem. But, pardon me, there are scenarios where we can, uh, where it should be one organization and one customer, and then potentially multiple delivery addresses against another company. So when I was working in logistics, we had a customer that sold furniture, and that furniture they were selling to Mattress Firm. Now, Mattress Firm, I think, has over 3,000 locations in the U.S., and our ERP system has a real bad problem displaying more than 60 addresses uh, against a single org. So, in a case like this, we actually set up Mattress Firm per state, sometimes north, south, east, and west in that state, depending on how many locations were in a single state. And we did not associate it. We just associated all of those addresses as delivery locations. We would still, in our ERP, we could tag a shipment to a customer, so that was the billing party. But then we can actually choose a different organization as the delivery address. And the reason we wouldn't do it like the 3PL scenario is we needed to type in getting them to remember to type in the specifics on the delivery label it's virtually impossible. They just don't do it because it's all automatic in the system that I work with. So situations like that, you have to get creative, and that's where your data governance comes in. That's where your data czar comes in, because what you don't want is, now that you've established a policy uh, on Mattress Firm, for example, and all of their locations, you don't want somebody just to go in and say, well, I can't find this address, so I'll just create a entirely new company. No, it goes under the subset of this state that they're in. This is what's going to happen when people are not monitoring that database. Uh, while does it hurt you? It only hurts you when you're running reports, and these statistics are not, or these data sets are not included in the reports, because they're off in la la land. So the concept of the data czar isn't necessarily for them to fill out and create the actual organization. The goal is to have customer service input as much data as possible, customer service, sales, anybody other than this person, but they have to go in and follow and make sure the guidance that's been established, um, or the data governance that's been established, is being followed. And really consider, when we had company sending the Mattress Firm, how do we handle this? These are, you know, it's great if we can do it via committee, but sometimes it's just easier to do it with one person who's in charge of the data if he's understanding it. Now, one other concept I need to explain to you about the data czar is you need multiple. If you're running, if that person goes out of town, or you run a worldwide organization, you need multiple data czars in each country. You will get people creating temporary organizations, and they need them put in there as permanent organizations now. Sometimes these are urgent things that have to be done right away. Oh, I've got an urgency, Bob. Bob, it's just really urgent. I need to have this data input and updated right now. Do you know what time it is in China when you're calling me? That's the scenarios that happen. I've seen it. So if you don't have enough people that do this, but it should be a very finite amount of people that are doing this type of work, and who have access to create these. Um, some of them can be really finite, like specific fields like AP and AR. Um, but others can be maybe more widely used. So this is where we deal with statistics, and we take into account the security groups and roles that people play within the different organizations that we have. It's really, really, really important that we take all of that into consideration. But it's hard to do on the day of deployment, or on the, it's probably something you kind of look at and you circle back around to. You start off with a few, and then if it's not enough, we add some more. But always start with a small amount and then go from there, because it's harder to take some permissions away from people than it is to give them permissions. So I always believe in starting small and growing from there, as the demand rises. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you actually learned something. So now I can finally get off my, soapbox. Thank God, because I got to do some laundry. I really do. I hope you learned something. I mean, this is a general discussion. I know I'm discussing with myself, but these are my thoughts on this. I've spent a lot of time working on these areas, and I'm really hoping that what I have learned might benefit some of you in a discussion that you might have to have with your executive staff. If nothing else, you refer them to this video and say, "This is what these people are doing." Um, it's my years of work that I think give me a leg to stand on, let alone a soapbox. And I really do hope that you take master data sets into consideration and governance and security rights and, looking at middleware. All of this is going to help lower your bottom line, lower your risk, and make you potentially a more profitable, more lean company and easier for your customer service staff to work with. They want to look at very minimum data sets, and that's what I would encourage you to provide. They don't want to look at giant lists. They would much rather look at small lists. Well, I hope you learned something, and I hope you contact me if you ever need help in this area.